President Trump portraying it as over, despite the conflict very much continuing as it now approaches its 7th month. The president yesterday posted this AI image on social media showing himself standing between two signs. One reads, "Mission Not Accomplished, 2001 to 2021," next to an image of President George W. Bush. The other reads, "Mission Accomplished, 2026," next to an image of Iran's former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. While Khamenei was killed at the start of the war, his hardline son has taken his place as leader. And despite the president's declaration in that post, most of the stated objectives for the war, like ensuring Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon, remain not accomplished. So, Jonathan Lemire, I don't quite get John Meacham, I don't quite get the sign that's up there. We see, of course, George W. Bush had the moment on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is back in the news recently. In 2003, there was a mission accomplished banner that was held over his head for a very long time about the Iraq war. I guess he's suggesting that President Trump, somehow achieved regime change because Khamenei is dead, in a way that Presidents George W. Bush, Obama, by the way, President Trump in his first term, and President Biden did not. But what do you see in that image? And, by the way, the president just hoping this war will go away.
Well, the fact that he's posting artificial images of his heroism as commander-in-chief, I think, tells you everything you need to know, right? I mean, it's an invention of and a dispute, an open, ongoing dispute with reality. By the way, reality is undefeated in human events, right? That it's gonna win, no matter what we do to create a false sense of security and affirmation around ourselves. Facts will out. And I think we're in a real democratic lowercase d crisis here, because the Iran war is, to my knowledge, thinking about it, and Barnacle, who's been doing this since Fort McHenry in 1812. So tell me if I'm right here. This is a conflict with almost virtually no purchase, no role in the American imagination, right? Can people picture what's happening? Can you think of an event? You know, it's not something that we're engaged with in a way that a country should be engaged, a democracy should be engaged when we project power in our name. Compared to what both President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush did with Iraq, with Kuwait in 1990-91, and Iraq in 2003. Those were, say what you will about why we did it, how we did it. It was laid out for the public. And in 2003, the intelligence was wrong, but there was Colin Powell at the UN. They went to Congress. You know, they told a story, not for artificial ego purposes, but a story so that we would be engaged with our blood and treasure. And that has not happened here.
Yeah, there was no argument made for it, and it certainly was not a campaign promise. And again, the American people can see the results of this every time they pump gas, which brings it home to them and reminds them that this happened. Jonathan Lemire, that brings us to the new piece you've co-written for The Atlantic, titled "The Real Reason Trump Wants Economic Sanctions in Iran." What is that reason?
Well, there is the stated reason, which is that economic sanctions, they believe, could finally force Tehran to the negotiating table in a real way. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, as he's outlined them, he is yet to actually commit to those important secondary sanctions on places like China, Russia, North Korea that still do business with Tehran. And so far, Trump does not seem inclined to be tough with them. And look, the military operations not working. The diplomacy has faltered. Iran is stronger in the region now, including with its control of the Strait of Hormuz they've been before. So economic sanctions do make some sense. And the White House can point to evidence they have that the economy in Iran is weak. But of course, that regime has proven very resilient. They also have proven to not really care about the plight of their own citizens. But the other reason, just as important, is that this economic pressure is going to take a while. It's going to be slow. It's going to be steady, and it's going to keep the Iran war. The hope is, for the White House, out of the headlines. That every time President Trump takes Truth Social and says he's going to wipe out Iran's civilization, that generates a news cycle. Every time talks fail, that generates a news cycle. This will go slower, and the idea is to push it out of the public's mind ahead of the midterms this fall, to make Iran go from a front page story to inside the paper, if you will. Now, there's a risk to that, because if the economic pressure doesn't yield progress, well, prices, especially at the gas pump, probably going to stay pretty high. And that's a concern for Republicans as they seek re-election this fall. But that's the idea here, Vaughn, is that the part of this is the White House doesn't want to be talking about this anymore. Now, can President Trump be disciplined enough to do so if he feels humiliated by whatever the hardliners in Tehran do next? We'll see. His track record's not great, but they're really trying as best they can to push this, to memory hold this war, and thinking that'll help this fall.
Because this war has stabbed the godlike image that Donald Trump has wanted the country to believe that he portrays, the world's most powerful man. This war has undercut that standing. And when you look at China, President Xi coming, right, there's a reason that the president hasn't placed those sanctions on China, as Scott Bessent has threatened, for buying Iranian oil. And that is because you are looking at a president of the United States who, after 10 years of playing sort of the idea of this power dynamic of being the victim, representing in 2016 the forgotten man, and then during his first administration, trying to beat back against the deep state that was trying to stop the MAGA movement. And then in 2020, trying to fight back against the pandemic that was trying to kill the golden age, the greatest economy ever. And then in 2022, 2023, 2024, in the face of indictments and political persecution, he came roaring back here to fight for Americans. Well, the last 18 months, he's been the one solely in charge. And what we have heard from these voters that are speaking out runs completely in contrast to what we have heard from his voters over the last 10 years that repeatedly came to the defense of his tariff and trade war, saying that he was fighting for a better deal, that it would just take some time. He's going to win this for them, that, hey, if he gets into office, he's going to end the Ukraine war because he actually has a relationship with Vladimir Putin. That was a relationship that when the moment came, he would be able to put to good use. Well, he hasn't. And now when you look at the Iran war, there was a great many millions of Americans that believed that he would be able to stop the regime. He has failed to do that here. And so the president of the United States, there is nobody that he can point the finger at right now, because at the forefront of the political candidacies that he ran 3 straight times was that he was the most powerful man in the world.